Hello, everyone. Today is Monday, January 28th. This is the Cluster API Provider vSphere public meeting. This is bi-weekly meeting. I am going to go ahead and paste the meeting notes in chat so that please, everyone who's attending, if you guys can go ahead and add your information to the attendee list, and if there are any topics you want to discuss, we can discuss them during the meeting. Okay, so I pasted the link in chat. So let's go ahead and start the meeting. So the first topic today is we're going to show off a demo of the vSphere provider, the deployment and usage. This is mostly for our Heptio colleagues who have joined us and they've never seen this, so I'm going to go ahead and demo it right now. Okay, let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so the first thing I want to show is this is our repo, and part of our repo contains this installer folder. So before I go into the installer folder, I want to mention that in the Cluster API community, we've been working around two workflow models. One is what we've been calling the self-service model. It's the traditional Cluster API where you spin up a bootstrap cluster, and then you deploy the target cluster and then pivot over. And then the second workflow that the community have been working on, some of us in the community, is what we've been terming the management cluster model. And so the vSphere provider handles both. And as part of the artifacts for the management workflow, we also create an artifact that is an OVA. And this OVA is basically the install mechanism for deploying the initial bootstrap or management cluster. So in this folder right here, Cluster API Provider vSphere installer, we have we have all the bits for building the OVA, and the build process for the OVA is container based. We actually build everything for the OVA by hand. So we don't use any external tools like Packer or any other tools, and it doesn't require Ansible. The only thing that it requires is Docker. And let me go ahead and show. So I built one earlier, like about 15 minutes ago. It takes about 5 minutes, so I didn't want to take all that time building it. So let's go ahead and install the OVA, and then I'll demonstrate using it. So the first thing we're going to do is let's take a look at our, wait, let me move this toolbox. Okay, let's first take a look at our cluster. So this is our cluster, that vCenter cluster. Right now, the vSphere provider only deploys to vCenter. And right here, you see the web console for vCenter. We do have a provisioner for standalone ESX, but it hasn't been merged in yet. So we're going to go ahead and deploy to this vCenter. For the Heptio folks on the line, currently this is I'm using a 6.5 vCenter cluster, and there seems to be an issue right now where I cannot deploy the OVA using either the Flash or the web console In 6.7, there doesn't seem to be any problem, but there is a workaround for 6.5. So, and the workaround is to deploy it with the command line. So that's what I'm going to do right now. Okay, the first thing that we need to do is that we need to pass in some input parameters with the OVA. So I built two OVAs here. This one I built for KubeCon, which we were never able to demo, but and I just built this one. So the first thing I'm going to do is to extract a JSON document from this OVA. And see, oh, let's go back to the documentation. I want to show, if you're curious later on about what I'm doing, if you go into the doc folder, we actually have both quick starts with information on how to use the self-service model and the management workflow. And we also have some recorded videos, but today I'm just going to show it to you live. And if you go into the OVA documentation, all the information about what I'm about to do is all located there, okay? So I'm going to use a tool called GoVC. And I think I'm going to use the one from December because I know that one worked. The one I built today, I haven't tested yet. Let me just go back. Okay.
You're either running off the bottom of the screen or you're on a screen that isn't being shown when you're in the terminal. There we go. Thank you.
Let me increase the font size too. Is that better for everybody?
Yep. Thank you. Now you're scrolling off the bottom of the screen again.
Yeah. Okay.
That's perfect.
Okay. So now we go into what's that, JSON. What you see here are parameters that we need to pass in for the OVA to deploy correctly. So there are a few parameters that we need to fill. We need to fill in the password, the SSH key, and also yeah. Hey, Fabio, could you chime in? I thought that there was a username field also.
No, there's no username. That's for the username is just root. Okay. That's just the root password and the SSH key.
Okay, so we're just going to put in. No, this is a cluster that's sitting under my desk, so I don't mind showing you the password. So I'm going to go ahead and save that because I need is that? Yeah. I can't remember. I don't think that's, no, that's not it. Okay. So if you ran this on vSphere 6.7 using the UI, you would actually get a UI kind of like an install shell wizard that will, where you can actually enter in all of these parameters.
That's not the right one. Look,
That's
you need
not
to get
the-
the public key.
Okay. Okay, so now we're going to use GoVC to go ahead and upload the OVA. Is it import OVA? Yeah, import OVA. Options. We go to test that JSON. Okay. Let me, I forgot to set up my GoVC parameters. Okay, now just to test GoVC, sure that we have a connection. Administrator add vSphere.local.
Pretty sure that admin is a capital A.
Okay, so now we're connected. So let's go ahead and install it. GoVC. Doesn't like that. Where is the new line?
At the end of the key.
At the end of this key? Forgot about the data store. Okay, so while it's uploading, we're going to go switch back to the console because at this point, all of the work that we need to do to deploy the OVA will be handled at the UI. And as I said before, that if you're using 6.7, you can do all of this through the UI. And you know, one of the things that we could do is also take a look at why it doesn't deploy in 6.5 in the UI, but we haven't gotten around to that.
There's just general issue with the HVAC not providing functionality.
Even in the Flash UI, it wouldn't. So when you deploy it through the command line, the OVA just deploys as cluster-API, but if you deploy it through the UI, you actually get a suffix or a prefix. Fabio Which one is it? You'll get some alphanumerical.
So when you deploy through vCenter, when you do the wizard workflow, what you get is you get the VM name is based on the name of the OVA you're deploying. While if you're deploying through a tool like GoVC, the default name for the VM is cluster-API. If you want to change that, there's actually property in the spec that Luke was editing before to add when he was adding a root password and the SSH key, where you can change that and you can make it whatever you want. But by default, if you deploy through GoVC or any other automation tool, it will strictly follow the VM name in the property spec.
Okay, so after you deploy the OVA, it doesn't actually start up by itself. I went ahead and powered it on, and this is the OVA right here. So one of the cool features of what this OVA would do is that if you look here, it says Kubernetes cluster status in the blue section, and it will tell you, it will give you the progress that is going through to get up the Bootstrap, the management cluster. So why don't we wait for that to finish?
This is literally running kubeadm under the covers.
Can somebody tell me we're recording, right?
And while we're not using it today, because we're actually pulling down the container images from the internet, there's actually a good approach if you're deploying in what can be called an air-gapped environment where you have no access to the internet. Well, it sounds a little bit awkward, but it is still, in many places, actually still the status quo. So some people might want to have this deployed in a place where they have no internet access.
So according to the status, it is done. Let me, and here you see that it gives information on where to copy the kubeconfig down. So, oops. So let me go ahead and do that. Let me just remove this old one. Okay. I'm just going to call it kubeconfig. Okay, so I downloaded the kubeconfig, and if I just look at okay, so we have a management cluster running on there. Now, we currently don't have the cluster API running on the management cluster. We're going to rely on cluster CTL to actually deploy the management cluster to it. We've been debating on whether we should go ahead and install the management cluster when we install the OVA, and for the moment we decided against it, but I think it makes a lot of sense to go ahead and install the management cluster on that OVA. So let me exit. So we have deployed the management cluster. Now I want to go over how do you actually deploy cluster CTL and cluster API on here. Inside of the main repo, you can go into CMD cluster, and from here you can just go, go build dot go install, or you can just do it in one command. But this is what I usually do. Inside of the top level, we in our make file, we have a couple of build targets. One set for development and one set for production. Also another set for CI. We have a YAML command, we have a build, and we have a push. And what that does is, let's say, make you do make prod YAML, it will create an out folder, and inside of this out folder, you see all the YAML files used for the cluster API deployment. I'm going to go ahead and use one that I know works, that I've already filled out all the parameters. So and for the existing, now, like I said before, that right now, currently, we haven't decided on whether to go ahead and install the management cluster as the cluster API as part of the management cluster, but I think it makes a lot of sense to do so.
I think we're waiting on the automation for CI and building the OVA itself, because it's a little challenging to build the OVA, and who has been working on making sure that Prow can actually build a OVA artifact with the automated procedure. So I guess that the plan would be, let's get this done, and then start bundling, basically bundling cluster API into the OVA as a single entity. So, whenever somebody downloads the OVA, can just get started right away and just deploying it and start deploying in clusters.
Yeah. So, okay, so I just deployed a target cluster, and here's the target cluster. I think right now it's just waiting for the target cluster to finish so that you can grab the kube config from the cluster target cluster. But that's pretty much the conclusion of the demo for the OVA. Does anybody have any comments or questions? So, some of the functionality that we've been thinking about improving on the OVA is because the OVA has a kind of like install shell wizard like method to guide the users through the deployment. we can add functionality like allowing the users to pick which OVA, CNI plugins they want to install. Other things that we can improve on the OVA that we've done in the past is that we can deploy a web server that gives the status of both the management cluster and will allow the users to download information such as the log files or the kube config. So there's a lot of things that we could do with the OVA. Any comments or questions? Okay. While that is running, we can come back to it, but if you've seen cluster CTL against any other provider, it's going to come back the same way. Once it's got the kube config, it'll download it to the current folder and it will be finished. So why don't we go ahead and, unless there's any other comments or questions, we can go on to the other topics.
Hey, Luke, this is Miles. I have a question. What image is it downloading to deploy from? Is there an OVA that you guys have built that it uses as its default for deploying the cluster? Like what kind of, I guess it's Photon or something like that, but is that hosted somewhere? Is it publicly accessible?
So are you talking about the installer or are you talking about the nodes itself?
The nodes.
So the nodes, this is going to lead into the next topic actually. Currently, the way that the provider works is that the user must go ahead and upload a cloud init image. So I have done that previously. This is the cloud init image, is a Ubuntu image, and you create a VM template from it. And when you're creating these, modifying the YAML files that were created, you specify the name of the VM template here.
Okay, and then we just use Cloud Init to install the packages within the OS, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
To just expand on that answer, right now we're leveraging, basically just a vanilla image that is provided by, I guess it's built by Canonical for Ubuntu, and that works with Cloud Init. So we just add the Cloud Init source, we configure the machine, we go in there, we install the packages that we need, blah blah blah. That's basically the install process. We were thinking about creating a stamper process to basically create pre-built node templates that we can either create ourselves, give a user access to create them themselves if they want to customize them, and maybe store them in a place where we can point to them and say, these are nodes that we actually tested against. So if you like your flavor of Ubuntu, you like your flavor of, I don't know, Fedora, CentOS, whatever that is, you can just download this and use it. Or you can customize and start from source. So we're thinking about creating this stamper process. Actually, had an interesting discussion on that during the Cluster API AWS provider meeting earlier today.
Yeah,
but we're not unsure yet on what's the what's the plan going forward.
Sure. Does that if we were to stamp out the OVA images, does that not put a lot more responsibility on us for like security patches and that kind of stuff as well, rather than just using the vanilla image from Canonical and installing the packages in it? There's a lot more we would have to manage if we were going to build OVAs for each distro and that kind of thing.
So let me say something. So currently, the demonstration I showed you earlier, where we actually built the OVA, that stamps the installer image, but the node image is not part of that OVA currently. We were discussing whether we should include the node image with the OVA, but we decided not to do that. That topic can be revisited, but Yeah, so I'm sorry, go ahead and finish your comments.
I think it was just around the node image. What I got from what Fabio was saying is that we were considering building node images based on Fedora, CentOS, Ubuntu, whatever distro it is, and pre-packaging those. And my concern with that was rather it would put a lot more load on us to maintain those images rather than just pulling down the base Cloud Init image and streaming the packages into it, which is fairly repeatable anyway.
There's a distinction there. So I don't think we want to pre-package them inside the installer. I think the installer is going to live on its own without having like anything bundled in it, except for maybe cluster API itself, like the CRDs and everything. So we don't want to bundle the node image in there. We want to have a way so we can point like a working node image to people of their favorite flavor potentially. Or we can give them the ability to build their own images starting from our own tested templates. So the idea is that we provide blueprints to end users. They use these blueprints to build their own. They use these blueprints to customize these machines to their own let's say if they want to have packages or anything. Or we can just point them to the images we built and that we tested, saying, these are the images that we built and tested. So if you want to use them, feel free. But I don't think that comes with like a responsibility of dealing with patches, even though it is definitely something we have to consider if we go down that path. I mean, I don't think we want to build anything that is as customized as like I don't know, like a super customized tailored version of Ubuntu for cluster API use, but more like this is just a regular cluster, a regular Ubuntu or Debian or Fedora distro install that happened to have all the Kubernetes bits pre-installed at the version that we wanted to have. So it's more like convenience rather than something we want to support like fully through the life cycle.
Okay, so it's more of just up and running. This is a known good. This works, yes, but you can still build your own if you want to via this other method.
Yes, that's the idea. And again, these are all ideas for now. So we have I don't think we have any plan or anything. We're just discussing this and going back and forth and figuring out what is the best tool, what is the best process to actually have this in place, because this is not just vSphere, this is for every cluster API provider. So AWS has the same problem, the difference being that they have to stamp AMIs instead of OVAs or VMs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, cool. Thanks, guys.
Miles, were you at the AWS public meeting this morning?
No, I wasn't, and I'm actually just watching the Google Doc for the recording to go up so I can watch it. Okay,
so they were thinking about perhaps getting CNCF to also host the AMIs. I don't know how realistic that is, but we'll wait and see. We also discussed a couple of different ways to do the machine stamping, and I think the final solution for the machine stamping is going to take a while. It's not going to be V1 Alpha 1. It's going to be well into the future. But I did show a demo this morning of a previous project we worked on where you can take a Docker file that describes a VM, build it as a regular container, and then we can pull down the image, pull down the container image, and stamp out a artifact for the node image using the container image, and we could use that as a mechanism for machine stamping. It's not when you watch the demo, I showed off a previous project we did at VMware. What is more important from that discussion is just the pattern that the design pattern that we used for stamping in the past. I'm not advocating that we actually use that product, but we could use other products like Linux Kit. Somebody mentioned Linux Kit this morning. as the mechanism that we use to describe the final image and the way that we actually build the image. Yes, this is going to be an ongoing discussion and design process. So I don't think we can give you an answer right now on what is the best way to do it. I think we're going to have to come up with an intermediate solution before we get to the long-term solution, because right now, the creation of that VM template is a very manual task, and we don't really even have any instructions on how to build a custom version.
Right. That's the main reason I was asking is because I've gone through a similar thing recently where I wanted to create an OVA that was a known good and found that it's an extremely manual process that we have to go through. So I was just curious how you guys were solving that.
So we could possibly, Fabio, you can probably comment more on this. We could probably use some of the OVA stamping process, can we not, to create a node image?
The problem with the current process that we use to stamp the installer is that it is very, very customized. We actually, so just a little bit of history. This process has actually been built a few years ago for another project at VMware that I was working on. And it was originally built on Packer. So it was using Packer to build, to stamp this image. And the approach was very modular because you could basically plug in or plug any module you want and then get everything out of it. So with the same set of standardized stamping process. So you can get an AMI out, you can get a vSphere, OVA, and blah, blah, blah. But that process was not working inside a container. So at the time, we're running on Travis, we're running on Drone, CIs that are hosted inside Docker containers. So we could not just run it because we needed an hypervisor. So we built this script-based stamping process that does not use any hypervisor at all, but it builds an OVA out. So the problem is that you left that flexibility to get this done in that way. We were actually thinking about improving Packer and making sure basically that we can replicate the same process that we use today in Packer, so that way we can still have the modularity and have the same way of building things. And that would be a good way to use the same process to build both the installer and the node images. But that's another thing we're thinking about and haven't actually done any work on.
Okay. Given that it's 1:40 right now and we only covered the machine stamping and the demo, I think we need to proceed on with the rest of the agenda. So the next topic is a review of CI/CD and testing effort. Hui, you have a couple of issues that you want to discuss? Go ahead. I'll take notes while you're.
Yes, just mute it. So the right. Okay. So for the PR, that's to integrate the OVA build process into the test. The PR, basically the same, just demoed. We want to put that into a test so that we can test from starting from build the OVA image and deploy to the content library and deploy the management cluster. Then we start we deploy the target cluster. That's as a single test, and that PR is 164 and is there ready for review, and The reason is still not checking yet is because this PR include a file. It's a Python file to do the content library upload, and there's another parallel work going on for GoVC. GoVC, the tool we mostly use, but GoVC don't support the content library today. And there's a parallel working going on to support content library. And according to Doug, also Mark Peak he already have the working in progress PR patch, and we are going to have that soon.
So do you want us to go ahead and review this PR, or do you want us to wait till the GoVC before this?
The PR is definitely ready for review, except the Python code to do the content library thing. I don't think we need to review that too much because we're going to get rid of this soon.
But if we merge this PR in,
But there's a license issue.
Yes, so that's why I think
Okay.
maybe it's worth to wait a few days to wait for the GoVC and then merge the PR.
okay.
Okay,
Why don't you want to move this issue back to a whip, or do you want us to review it now?
I'm sorry, I think I missed this. Is there a timeline on the content library support? I know it is being worked on GoVMommy. I've seen some updates. But
We're talking about this morning. I think, possibly this week, but more likely next week.
okay, so it's soon anyway.
it's soon anyway. So I guess to answer Alok's question, the PR is ready for review. So please look at the review of the code that other than the Python file.
Well, why don't you move it to whip still? Because if somebody accidentally,
Approve it?
yeah,
Okay, I'll add it.
You can also put a hold on it.
you
Okay,
can do a /hold on it.
okay,
Okay, so the next issue is also yours.
okay. Yeah, the next issue is I opened this issue we want to improve the CI to not depend on the cluster control. We are dependent on it today. Cluster control is the easiest way to start the deployments. But we want to break this up into just use kube control so that we can lay the foundation for other future works. So we can kind of build small pieces.
Okay. Okay, so that one is just an issue. It's not a PR. So that's good. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on because we're running quickly out of time. We only got 15 minutes left, and let's go ahead and discuss the V1 Alpha 1 goals. So we were going to have a meeting last week on this, and it was suggested that we go ahead and do this in the community meeting today around this topic instead. So I want to make this more of a discussion and get input from everybody. And I kind of divided the work into 4 categories: CI/CD and testing, documentation, vSphere specific feature work, and then upstream. Okay, so for CI/CD and testing, and I'm not going to give all the answer. I'd like to get input from everybody. CI/CD and testing. What would you guys like to include?
I think we definitely need to have some automation around the OVA build and test. And I know that Hui as a PR, that is definitely one thing I definitely look forward to most on having it for v1 alpha 1. And once we have that, and I was thinking about what you mentioned before of having basically Cluster API pre-installed in the OVA. I think it might be too early to do that. Based on the we haven't tested the OVA fully on every check-in for like since we merged it. So we've been testing it manually, and it's been fine. And it's not going to influence a lot the way Cluster API provider vSphere works, but still, it's definitely a critical component of the entire UX of Cluster API provider vSphere. So I want to feel confident to do these two steps at the same time. So we have an OVA. We know that we can install Cluster API on it, and then run it. And we have a good degree of confidence that this is going to work. But having it done automatically, without going through some testing first, like some cycles of testing, I think it's probably too premature to do that.
Okay. Hui, do you have any?
Yes, we have discussed there's kind of work we want to do in the actually earlier. We want to cover the machine sets and also different kind of deployments.
Okay, so
that should be achievable soon.
So testing.
Kind of testing matrix.
Testing matrix for deployment.
Right.
Okay. How about you, Doug? Do you want to do anything with vCSIM?
Yeah, there's definitely more we can do with vCSIM. In the last quarter, we had the initial set of tests that brought I think the unit test coverage was less than 10%. Now it's 40 plus. So there's definitely more we can do there, not just for code coverage, but for some of the vSphere configuration differences that customers have in their environments that we might not have in our end-to-end, and it's not worthwhile trying to reproduce in a real environment either.
Do you think that the work around simulating a cluster with containers in vCSIM, do you think that's a possible?
It's definitely possible. I mean, some of the implementation went into vCSIM where you can have from the API perspective, the lifecycle of the virtual machine will actually control a container. So all the power operations and create VM, destroy VM. And then it also fills in all the guest info, the addresses and stuff. So
that seems like a big chunk of work. Do you think it's possible to do in this quarter, or should we just hold off?
The part that I just described is already in there.
Okay.
And it actually ends up being pretty straightforward. So I think the harder part would be, we want to actually run like the test for that functionality just runs Nginx and hits it with Perl. But if we want to actually stitch together a cluster that with multiple things talking to each other, then that could be more work, but we haven't really thought it through yet either.
Okay. One thing that I wonder about is this topic of kicking off a automatic build of the official artifacts. Yeah. Do you think that we can do that this quarter?
We already have kind of a automation to push those container image, but we haven't defined the tag process, like how to integrate. Basically, I'm thinking that we need to wait for the test result to make sure all the end-to-end tests are passing before we actually publishing their production container or artifacts. So that has not been defined, but I think this is something quite important.
Okay, I put a question mark there, and I'm going to go ahead and create an issue around that topic. Because right now we are manually creating the artifacts and pushing it up and tagging it. And okay.
We do have automation for that, but we're not doing the automated processes.
Yeah.
I think we should treat that as opportunistic. I mean, if everything goes well and we have all the testing in place and everything works, automating just that part might be potentially trivial. It's always, hard to say from a distance, but the automation looks like it's there.
The next topic is documentation. What do you guys think about this? We currently have documentation, quick start documentation to help users get up and running. We don't have a lot of other extensive documentation. I have started a Gitbook documentation, but because of KubeCon, I was not quite ready to. I was not able to finish it and add it to our repo. Do we think that we have enough documentation for V1 for this quarter for V1 Alpha 1? If nobody has an opinion, then I think we can just hold off on this. Yeah.
I'll just say that there's a Kickstart guide for using the OVA or not, and actually even using the OVA doesn't change much. So if the Quick Start works and somebody can validate if it still works, I think we should be fine.
Okay.
And also, I just say this: it might be interesting to ask this during the Cluster API working group, see if there's any effort in standardizing documentation across providers, because that's very important.
Okay. Moving on to vSphere specific feature work. So I don't.
Oh, sorry to interrupt. The issue I just put there, the 181 issue, actually, I think it's going to provide the documentation for the detailed steps that just use kubectl to do the deployment, and I'm going to use that PR to document all the steps.
Okay.
So probably it's a new section of in the quick start.
Okay. So the next topic is vSphere specific feature work, and this is outside of the work that Siddharth's team needs in order to finish their product. This is specifically to the open source vSphere provider. So we have one PR open. This is the ESX provisioner. This was built prior to the CRD migration. The question is, should we go ahead and work to get this merged?
I think we should make it opportunistic as well. I'd really like to see that merged before V1 Alpha 1, because I think it can speed up development significantly. But I have yet to look at it, especially since KubeCon and the CFPs for KubeCon and other CFPs that have been floating since the early days of January. So it's gonna an interesting time right now. But I will definitely see if I can actually bring it up to speed, because I think it's very important for us as developers as well to have it.
So let me explain this ESX provisioner. As I described during the demo, that currently the vSphere provider requires vCenter. And technically, the only reason it requires vCenter is because of the VM template. And we don't have that capability on ESX. But Fabio has worked on a provisioner that will deploy to a single ESX host. So if you guys recall, I'm running ESX within VMware Fusion. on my desktop. So if we had that provisioner, it would greatly speed up development time because I won't need a external cluster. I can just do it all from my laptop. So, but we haven't looked at that PR in a while, and there's probably going to be significant work just to get a rebase and test it. Okay, how about improvements to the OVA? I mean, Fabio, we've discussed a lot of things that we could do with the OVA. What do you think? Is it feasible to do some of those improvements, or should we shelve those improvements till later?
I think specifically for V1 Alpha 1, I think we should just hold on any improvements for the OVA. Just keep it to bug fixes. I'm sure there will be plenty if people start looking into them. Just keep it bug fixes. Hold off on any new features. I see that the next big new feature for OVA will be to incorporate cluster API as an artifact inside it. So that means that we have to synchronize, have CI build the artifacts, inject the cluster API artifacts into the OVA build and then test it and then have it shipped somewhere. But that I will keep this new feature set for the next release, not this one. I think we should just have a solid V1 Alpha 1 release that works, that has some manual steps involved, but that works, rather than having something that we just get half done and we're not proud of it.
Okay, so we're quickly running out of time. I think we're going to talk about the last topic, Siddhartha. Well, I think we're going to delay your topic till next 2 weeks from now. Okay. So for V1 Alpha 1, I think our goal. What do you guys think? We have a working vSphere provider installer OVA. We'll continue working on the CI/CD testing, but it feels like we should probably refocus our efforts on helping the upstream cluster API get to V1 Alpha 1. What do you guys think?
Yeah, agreed.
Slug, just to clarify, when you say upstream, what exactly are you talking about? Are you talking about
the main cluster API project?
Like the core cluster API, not the provider vSphere part.
Exactly.
Okay, and are we going to list out items or features for?
Well, we're going to review the board and then start picking items on there. So
all right.
up until now, those of us involved with the vSphere provider have been focused solely on the vSphere provider, but now that we have a working artifact, I think it's time to start refocusing our attention to the main project now to try to help them get to V1 Alpha 1. Okay. Okay. So unfortunately, we're out of time. Siddhartha, we'll have to talk about your anti-affinity rules for the created machine till the next meeting.
Sure.
Are there any other comments or questions for this meeting for today? Okay. I want to throw out a proposal out there right now. Does everybody believe that this bi-weekly meeting is sufficient, or should we move this to a weekly meeting?
Let's vote it on the Kubernetes Slack channel. That's what we did before, and it actually worked pretty well. So let's put it as a poll and see what what the responses are.
Okay. Okay. Let's create a poll. I guess we can do like the Google Doodle that they. Is it Google Doodle that they not Doodle but.
I'll I'll show you
Okay.
the thing I used before. It actually worked pretty well.
Okay. Okay, we'll create a survey to see if people think that we should move to a weekly or keep it as a bi-weekly. Okay. If there's no further questions or comment, I think we're finished for this week. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye, folks.